Yeah, hello. Very warm welcome to all of you, wherever you might be tuning in from around the world, whether you're here in the United States, in Europe, or in Africa. We are very delighted to have you here on a live show on KDRTV. It is 10:20 here in the United States. It is 11:20 Eastern Standard Time, and it is 7:20 East African Time. So delighted again to engage you, viewers here in the United States and elsewhere around the world, on topical issues that especially affect the African immigrants here in the United States and how that also relates with those ones back in Africa. But we want to send an apology first to our viewers, especially those ones in Europe and in Africa. This time was early on allotted for Professor Patrick Lumumba, who, by the way, is standing by from Nairobi to talk to diasporans in the United States. But because of a lapse of time, and there it is, and because of a lapse of time here in the United States, actually it is 10:20 Central Time. It is 7:20 in East African Time, but because of the time lapse, 1 hour difference, that conversation with Professor Patrick Lumumba will come on in an hour's time. So please stand by for that interesting conversation that I think thousands of people are waiting, not only here in the US, but elsewhere around the world. But before then, we get back to the United States and focus on another topical issue that affects most immigrants here, and that is about the legal issues that affect African immigrants in the United States. And we are going to have a conversation with one of the respected attorneys here in the United States, and there's a gentleman now on the screen, that is Attorney Henry Ongeri, who is joining us live from Minneapolis, and I think he's standing by from his home office or his office, wherever it is, but I know for sure he looks pretty good. A very good morning to you, Attorney Ongeri.
Good morning, Dr. Kari. Good morning to you. Thank you.
Right. So it's good to have you here, and thank you for really willing to talk to us here on KDRTV, and also by extension talk to African immigrants in the United States, and also at least inform those ones who are watching this show from Africa, so they have a good understanding of what happens with this. And especially when talk about legal issues, these are issues that affect a lot of people, and I think most dreams have been shattered because of a lack of understanding of the legal framework of the United States. Again, many thanks to you for the great work you've been doing here, especially in the last 25 years. I think you've been a leading voice, not just about matters of law, politics, but I think your involvement in the community is very well noted and appreciated. And on behalf of the team here at KDRTV, many thanks to you. So if you don't mind, very quickly for our viewers, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kari. My name's Henry Ongeri, and as Dr. Kari said, I'm an attorney here in the United States. I am the founding and managing partner of the Transatlantic Law Firm, and I'm also the president of the African Business Consulting Group. I am licensed to practice law in the United States in both Minnesota and New York, and also in the federal court. I am a member of the Minnesota State Bar Association, Law Society of Kenya, New York State Bar Association, Kenya USA Bar Association, and American Immigration Lawyers Association, among others. I volunteer as a founding chair of Kenya Diaspora Must Vote, which is a lobby group here in the United States. I am also the legal director of the Magharibi Economic Development Corporation, which is a global corporation looking at development issues in Western Kenya. And also, I'm the founder and patron of Wakirese Foundation, a grassroots movement in Nyamira County. Before I proceed, Dr. Kari, permit me to say a big thank you to you and your team at KDRTV for your understanding and support during the last few weeks when I lost my nephew, Jonathan Best. And through your support and prayers and the community's help, we have got him back in Kenya for burial. Just wanted to very much for that. And I think that's it for my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakil. Of course, we understand it's a very difficult situation for the family and the especially Kenyan community here in the state of Minnesota. Of course, we send our condolences as usual. So let's get to the discussion here, and thank you for coming on the show last time when we were dissecting the current political environment in the U.S. Unfortunately, today we're not going to talk a lot about politics. We're going to talk more about legal issues. Now, the campaigns are over, of course. We already have a new president-elect that will be in office in a couple of weeks' time. Very interesting in the United States. But from a legal standpoint, there was a discussion before then about the status of the outgoing administration in regard to immigration laws. Now we do have a new potential new administration of Joe Biden. From your end, how would the new administration really affect the immigration issues that really affect our immigrant population?
Thank you. That's a big question. Of course, the part of the excitement that drove the record election turnout here in the United States, I have no doubt, had to do with the immigration policy and practice. So I think quite a few people were happy to welcome the new administration of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, due in part to their promises to reform and change the way immigration is conducted in the U.S. The first thing that I think a lot of people are expecting, myself included, is that the new administration will really set the worldview on U.S. immigration. In other words, we will again begin to redefine immigrants as a net benefit to the country as opposed to a national threat that needs to be countered. And you've seen that in the past 4 years, how that manifests in practice. Though the United States is famously known as the land of immigrants, the past 4 years may have seemed a little different in that it looked like a land where immigrants are tolerated, if even so, but in most cases not wanted. And so I think one of the things that people are watching carefully is to see that reset. Along with that, I think there is a lot of anxiety because Vice President, as he was, promised that within 100 days, he's going to roll back the over 400 executive actions that were taken by President Trump relating to immigration, and that's everything from the travel ban to how judges adjudicate immigration cases, enforcement priorities, ICE raids. I mean, it's a long list. And so the promise that some of those will be rolled back is something that we'll be watching very carefully to see how President Biden, once he's inaugurated, takes action, he said, on first day. The other thing, Dr. Kari, that I think a lot of people voted for was a promise to protect the deferred action for childhood arrivals, popularly known as DACA. And that has gone back and forth between courts, and as of last Friday, I think it was reinstated again. I don't know how many times this by a federal judge. So taking action on DACA to finally put some peace into the hearts of the beneficiaries, I think, would be something we all would like to see. There is also a promise by the Biden administration when it gets in to help restore the asylum system. You probably know, or our viewers know, that under President Trump, the number of refugees allowed into the United States was drastically reduced. And so rather than the welcome mat that we used to hold telling the world, bring your tired and you're poor, we said, if you have problems in your home country, please stay there. So there is a feeling that under President Biden, that we will go back to a more humane treatment of people fleeing chaos and persecution, which is what the United States has done for many years. The bottom line, though, is the law remains the same. And so we'll be watching very carefully to see how President Biden navigates the immigration system, because it's going to need Congress. Finally, Dr. Kari, I want to mention that he did promise during the campaign to send a bill to Congress that would start legalization of the over 11 million people in the United States without proper documentation. Now, we all know that that is the comprehensive immigration reform that President Bush tried, did not succeed. President Obama made an effort, did not succeed. If President Biden is going to do that, he is going to need the support of both houses of Congress. Now, that may be easier if the Democrats are able to take control of the U.S. Senate. As it is, as we speak today, the 2 seats in Georgia are up in the air. We don't know who's going to win. So the fate of 11 plus million people in the United States may really hang on the outcome of the Senate race in Georgia. But again, there is reason to be optimistic, at least for immigrants from all over the world, not just Africa, under Biden administration, if only based on the promises that he made.
You and I know well that politics is politics. Politicians talk, and that's pretty much it, right? But Joe Biden, with all due respect, was the vice president to former President Barack Obama. But it's also a matter of fact that they did deport a lot of people. In fact, it's been termed as a chief deporter, if you will. And so what reason should we have? And again, this is a very sensitive topic, particularly to the immigrant population. We just noted the numbers there. 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, most of whom actually come from the African continent. How realistic is that promise, really?
I agree with you 100% that politicians will be politicians. Sometimes they say whatever they need to say to get elected. But there is something a little different that I want to mention. I think that the 84 or so million people that voted for President Biden, as they will be on the 20th, I think also voted for what is called character and integrity. I think it would be a massive disappointment if, despite him loudly proclaiming that I'm going to do this, that he doesn't even try. I understand the dynamics of implementing a law across a country as huge as the United States, but at the very minimum, I believe that Joe Biden owes people an effort to show that he tried to stick to his word. And those who know him, you know, famously people said, I know Joe. Those who know Joe, they say that he's a man of his word. So we're going to hang on to that until hopefully he doesn't disappoint us. But, you know, your guess is as good as mine.
Okay. So in 1 or 2 sentences, what do you say to members of a community who have immigration-related issues?
I would tell them to do 2 things. For those who are spiritually inclined, I would say pray. Okay. First thing, keep praying. Second thing is talk to your immigration lawyer. Explore what options may be there in the event that one thing happens or the other. If you're a DACA recipient, talk to your lawyer about what benefits may have been restored. If you don't have documentation, still talk to your lawyer about that, so that if and when something drops from Washington as far as immigration is concerned, then you are ready to go. And while we are on this, permit me, Dr. to say that there is a deadline for the filers, the Liberian nationals. The deadline for filing is just about 2 weeks out. So December 20th. So again, these things, almost everything I know in immigration law has a deadline. So it's important that you get to your lawyer's office, or at least contact the lawyer as soon as possible. I would say if you have any immigration issue, please talk to your lawyer, in addition to getting on your knees and praying for a good outcome.
Good, thank you. So Wakili Attorney Ongeri, let's move on to another subject that I know is very thorny. We haven't really, as immigrant population, talked about this, and our hope is that KDRTV provides a platform from which we start talking about these things in a very candid way. Now, all in the introduction, you talked about losing your nephew, and of course, our condolences to you, and the body has been shipped to Kenya, and hopefully it's been carried or put to rest. But there is a big picture when we talk about that. The immigrant population is really increasing. Our children are growing. We know for sure we're not going to live forever. Our time will come on earth and we'll move and then leave the next generation. Talk to us about this subject of really people not planning for their retirement and the inevitable fact that all of us at some point will die. And especially those ones here in the US who might say, I want to die, if I die, I want to be buried back in Kenya. And again, with coronavirus, you've noticed in the community, we've had a lot of problems where the question has been, yes, I have a will here, I wanted to be buried back in Kenya, but because of these unexpected occurrences, and then we're now forced to go through the legal processes. So what do you say to our immigrant population regarding matters of planning for their retirement and subsequent expiration from earth?
Thank you. Thank you. That is a question that I have wrestled with for years now, and let's face it. And I'm glad that these are candid conversations. And by the way, I should mention that as we go through these candid conversations, we may share legal points, but we are not seeking to provide any legal advice. We are not establishing any attorney-client relationship. All we are doing is to provide information so that for those who have an issue, they can contact their professional person for advice. So just to be clear on that. But back to the question, Daktari, is here is the news. We are all going to die. We really are. And acting and living as though that is not going to happen, I think is not smart. It is even more critical when we have feet in two places. The Africans have a foot in Africa, and they have a foot, and they're building an even bigger footprint in the United States, for example. That makes the idea of thinking and planning ahead as important, really, as eating and sleeping. Here is why. When we do not know what your wishes are while you are still alive, what you are really inviting is a fight over those same wishes when you are dead, and you will not have an opinion. I know this sounds a little harsh, but I would like us to be brutally honest about this. If, for example, just take an example, a person from Africa who has accumulated some wealth, because Africans are hardworking people, they build wealth fairly quickly wherever they go. And unfortunately, they were to die, and they haven't made their wishes known in one way or the other. We have the African family in Africa, in most cases extended family, hundreds of cousins and thousands of other relatives who now lay claim to not just the body of that person, but the assets of that person. What happens to that person's children? Are they going to move back, in my case, to Nyamira County, or are they going to stay in Minneapolis? What happens if this person suffers an injury or an illness that renders him unable to speak or direct us in any way? What happens when this person cannot act on their own behalf? What I'm saying, Dr. Kari, is failing to plan our own inevitable death is planning to fail, and it's expensive. As a lawyer who has fought these fights before, I can tell you it's way cheaper for you or me to put these things in order while we're still living, while we're still talking, than us having to fight in probate court or any other court while you are dead. And I know that today there is no time for us to go through the whole process of succession and death. But here are the 4 documents that we recommend every one of our clients, especially our African immigrant clients, have. The first document we recommend is a will. It is not true that you have to have a lot of money to have a will. A will simply states your wishes, and every one of us has a wish. It may be 1 billion shillings, it may be 10 shillings, it's still a wish. We encourage you to have a will. Second document is a trust. Again, you don't have to have millions of dollars or shillings to have a trust that guides how we manage your assets, even while you're still alive. You've had things called living trusts. Those are things that we need to start looking at because they bring great clarity as far as your assets are concerned. The third document, Dr. is a power of attorney. You've all heard of it. A document that designates a person to act on your behalf in the event that you are not able to act on your own, but you can't be at that place. These are very common for people who are back home or giving some other direction. The 4 that we recommend is called Healthcare Directive. This is the one I described where, God forbid, you got into an accident and you got injured, you're in ICU, we don't know where anything is, we don't know whether we should turn off the machine. What would you like us to do in that situation? So the Healthcare Directive document help do that. There are many other documents, Dr. that I would like not to go into in this session, but just an example to show you that we have the tools. Your lawyers have the tools. You just need to engage them. And not to self-promote, but to show how committed I personally and our law firm is to doing this, we're going to offer heavily discounted rates for the preparation of these documents through the first quarter of 2021. Okay. Just get in touch with us and we'll discuss that. That is how committed we are to ensuring that we all are prepared for the inevitable because, as you said, it's coming.
Wakil, I know you chose your words very carefully, which is what any lawyer should do, but I want to push back a little bit. If we want to be very honest, and I've seen a couple of cases, and it's very painful to watch. There are obviously people watching across the country, and there are those ones watching in Kenya. There are people actually who have multiple families. To be fair, there are men who have families here, they have children here, and they have children in Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, whatever that country is. And sometimes people assume if you're in the U.S., then you protect those ones in the U.S. But if something, God forbid, happens, those ones back home really end up suffering. Do you mind talking to that target population what they need to do in terms of protecting both sides of the family?
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important question, and I'm glad you brought that up. People with multiple families or multiple interests, really the advice is exactly the same. First of all, remember that the information you provide to your lawyer as part of this process or really any other process is confidential. What that means is that you can confidently tell your lawyer, whether the lawyer is based in the United States or in Kenya, that, counsel, I have a family here that not very many people know about, but I'd like this to happen in the event of my death or disability. And the lawyer would honor that. So the document that the lawyer produces would follow your information, and that information is confidential. And as lawyers, it's not our job to judge whether someone should have 1 or 2 families. That's up to them. But once I know that, then I'm able to draft the proper instrument that will protect the interests of both, or however number they are, and we will be able to say, here is what the late wanted to happen. Family A to family B to family C to asset A to asset B to asset C. And that to me is reason for us to very confidently walk into the lawyer's space and say, here's what I'd like to do. And as usual, please make sure that this is between you and I. That is the whole idea behind client confidentiality, that is that we cannot disclose this absent an order of the court that says I have to disclose that. That information never leaves the 4 corners of my office ever.
Okay.
And that, I think, is helpful for people who are worried about that. Just wanted to mention also that I just saw in my feed this morning that the world famous Diego Maradona,
Yep.
while he passed last
Good
week,
example.
it turned out he had not made a will. You can imagine how messy that is going to be in Rio de Janeiro now, because multiple people are going to claim things. Another person we just learned about is the 46-year-old founder of Zappos. He also died without a will. These things happen and nobody knows their day. We encourage us to have these candid conversations. We know they're uncomfortable, but the best time to have this is now, rather than fight over your assets while you're gone.
Well, I think that's a good point again, Okilongeri. I hope you will come back again to talk about that topic. I know other lawyers have really suggested that we need to talk about that, and you gave a good example of Diego Maradona. Obviously, it's a non-public fact, really. He has multiple children, and I think there's a law that really talks about law of inheritance, regardless of what it is, whether you have children here, whatever, around the world. Those children need to be protected, or those family members need to protect it. This is something that is happening. It's real and among us, and we don't talk about it. But I think it's high time we really start talking about this. And the best way, I think, as you said, contact your lawyer. So let's move on and talk about another subject here, about criminal law. Yes, the country is a country of laws. That's as simple as it can get, right? But I think when you look at the immigrant population, sometimes there is a lack of understanding of what it really means using that 911 or putting families into the legal process. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's gone through very difficult times. He didn't realize that if you dial 911, pretty much you've lost the game. It's no longer, the conversation is no longer on your hands, it's in the hands of the legal system, and that can have very, very, very devastating ramifications. Do you mind speaking directly to our immigrant population, especially, what really it means, really using 911 or using the criminal justice systems as a way of solving issues?
Thank you, Dr. Kari. That is yet another important subject that we don't speak about enough. And today, the way I would like to come at that, it's a very complex question of interaction with the criminal justice system. And the way I would like to begin is by saying that, yes, an ideal world means nobody commits any crime. An ideal world means nobody gets in trouble. But you and I do not live in an ideal world. We are not perfect. Our clients are not perfect. No one is. What that means is that at one point or other, somebody is going to do something that would get him in trouble. And that is where we come in. In our practice, we approach it this way. First, we do not want to be the ones beating you up a second time. Let's just say that, as we've seen multiple times, that you're involved in a domestic violence charge. I know KDRTV did a whole show on domestic violence. I think it's a week or so ago.
Yes, it did.
So if you come to my office, you have a domestic violence charge. As a lawyer, it's not my place to remind you of how horrible a person you must be to have been involved in this incident. In other words, we are sensitive to the fact that you already feel enough shame and guilt. So we very quickly move away from there and look at what underlies the problem in addition to trying to fix it. For one, let's all know that the U.S. criminal justice system has a disparate impact on Black and brown communities. I don't need to restate the fact that perhaps if George Floyd had been white, he would be alive today. And that tells you everything you need to know about our criminal justice system. Now, knowing that, African immigrants should really be careful, as you said, in trying to feed this, what I call 911 pipeline. What do I mean by that? I mean husband, wife having rather loud conversation at home, a disagreement. Disagreements are everywhere. There is no family that doesn't have that. And then one party picks up the phone and calls 911. From that point on, and you are spot on when you said from there, it is now in the hands of some other people. And these are not necessarily people who understand us or who would sympathize with the reason why we did that. There is a very specific clash of cultures that we witness in this area. And for this one, I'm going to go to Kisii. In the Kisii language, these are people who live in Kisii and Nyamira counties of Western Kenya. In the Kisii language, the word for killing and the word for beating is exactly the same, which means that if a spouse calls the police and says, my spouse wanted to kill me, even when she meant to beat me, then there is a murder or an attempted murder charge. So at that point, you're seeing a situation where most likely a white policeman is saying, oh my goodness, there's a terrorist here. He's about to kill people. When the reality is it was a domestic issue that could easily have been resolved by some other means, maybe talk to a pastor or counselor or somebody. So you see that. The other example that I would like to give, which my audience is familiar with, is if an African person in the US, for example, is stopped by the police, our first instinct is to get out of the car and go talk to the policeman, because we believe it's rude to just sit there and wait for a man of authority. You should approach him and explain yourself. The reality is that if you do that, the policeman can feel threatened and end up shooting you. That becomes an interaction that was simple. It was probably a traffic violation that now has turned deadly. And there are many, many examples of how our culture as Africans has put a job. I was talking to somebody who had made a confession while being arrested. And I asked him why he did that. And he said, you know, I think it's rude to sit there and not answer questions. So the idea that Miranda rights, which protects your right to silence, runs counter to our culture that, you know, if a person in authority speaks to you, just sit there and remain silent. And yet that's what we advise our clients to do. So we have seen quick convictions come out of those interactions where the suspect, who is an African immigrant, is really struggling between, do I obey these rules or do I do what I'm culturally taught to do in a situation like this? The other thing that we have seen is, I know ignorance is no defense, but in defense of many of my clients, some of the time they actually do not know. And a typical situation is where a young man has come from Africa, and within a few years he runs into law enforcement, and he doesn't quite know what to do, what not to do. Okay. 2 years ago, our law firm had a long seminar on what the rights of people like these are. Remain silent. Do not sign anything. Talk to your lawyer. Do not volunteer information. Do not lie, and please do not run away, because you can't run away. There is nowhere to run to. So, okay. But the bottom line remains, Daktari, that as immigrants and as foreigners in a strange land, okay, we have to be doubly careful, because something that a white young man can get away with can get an African immigrant man killed. You remember Mr. Diallo in New York, yes, who died because he was taking out his wallet. So my advice, not just as a lawyer, but as a father of young black men, to our African immigrants is be really careful anytime you have to interact with law enforcement. And please, before you pick up the phone and call 911, think not twice. This time we're going to say think 3 times, because the consequences are grave. You do not want to see your husband or boyfriend deported because you call 911. You do not want to give them their licenses or ability to practice nursing because you call 911. I think nothing justifies that. Understandable problems exist, but do you really want your children to be raised by no father because you call 911? I would say think 3 times.
You are spot on, and I think, thank you. Good point. Again, for those ones who want to get more information, I think you can see Henry Ongeri and his law firm. You can contact him later. But let's move to another subject related to what you just talked about. The effects of the criminal justice system here in the United States, or the legal system on families. And I want us to be a bit more proud when we talk about family. I think people tend to define family as the nuclear, Mr., Mrs., and the children, and it ends there. We're not talking about that. We are talking about family, which means the immigrant population. So whether you are from Nigeria, for example, whether you're from Ghana or Kenya or South Africa, we are all sons of Africa. And I think as Professor Patrick Lumumba will be talking to us momentarily, we are one from an African continent, but because we probably don't understand how the system works, we sometimes jump into the system using 911 or using the legal system, which completely destroys us. And you're right on. I'm a professor, and you know well, usually when we have broken families, the chances are, almost 67% chances are, children under broken family do not complete school, and they're highly likely to get into the criminal justice system. And if they do, their records are spoiled, and if they're spoiled, probably they're not going to get jobs. If they don't get jobs, you know that's not good for that immediate family. It's not very good of us as an immigrant population, especially when we have people who are very knowledgeable in matters of law, in matters of education and business, when we should really be advising that. If you don't mind, I know you're a lawyer, but as a brother, as a father, as a friend to the community, please use a language that is understandable to us all and your viewers. How should we use the legal system, especially when it comes to family matters? I know people jump into the divorce processes without even understanding the consequences on them and the children and generations to come, and the impact on society. And more especially, again, I mentioned children, the impact on the children. Please do you mind talking to our audience on the same?
Thank you. Thank you. That's an important question, Dr. And one that we confront repeatedly. Unfortunately, not in the best of circumstances. By the time I'm having a conversation with an African brother or sister about a family issue, it's almost always a problem. And this problem could be a potential divorce. And I've had some people say that the fact that we have a system that allows people, for example, in Minnesota, it's called a no-fault state, where you can just say, I don't like you anymore, so I'm divorcing you. That encourages people to escalate what are really normal family tensions into divorce court. Our advice has always been, we are not marriage counselors, obviously. We encourage people to exercise patience. Be patient. If it helps, there are resources that can keep you separate for a time being as you all cool down and reflect on what you're about to do. Because it's not as simple as we sign on the dotted line, the divorce is done, and that's it. Now you have a million other problems coming down, including child support, visitation, things that you'd rather not deal with. We encourage people to try and resolve this. Many of those who belong to religious denominations, we encourage them to talk to their pastors, to talk to their counselors, not to force families together if they don't want to be, but to at least give that a chance, because the other side of this coin is very painful and very expensive. I've had a pair of clients that we handled their divorce a few years back, and then they got remarried 4 years later. And it's an interesting, bittersweet thing, but how about if we hadn't gone through the expense of the divorce and instead spent the money to go on vacation or something, or pay a counselor to help us? The other issue that I wanted to mention very quickly, Dr. that relates to African immigrants and families with respect to children, is what we call back home, what we call discipline. We've litigated cases where a parent has, quote unquote, disciplined a child and ended up being charged with what's called maltreatment of a minor. And in Minnesota, that can have significant consequences. The ones I just mentioned, if you are in the healthcare field, you probably never practice again. If you're not a U.S. citizen, you're probably going to be deported. In other words, let's not import those cultural things that we did without thinking back home in Africa to the U.S. without thinking twice, because the law here is fairly unforgiving, and I'll be the first one to confess that of all the cases that we have handled that involve child maltreatment, we have lost them, because what happens is the evidence is there. I mean, if you used a belt to discipline your child and she's bleeding and she goes to the school nurse and says, my mom or my dad hit me, there is no way to unmake that. And so what we would like to see happen is we want people to step back, take a deep breath, slow down, and get proper information. One other thing I wanted to mention real quickly, Dr. is we have gotten too used to Googling everything. Nowadays, I say there's an attorney called Mr. Google or Mr. YouTube. I would like to caution our community that when you go with a specific problem to attorney Google, it's the equivalent of drinking water from a fire hose. The information comes to you at I don't know how many 100 cubic meters a second, and it's difficult for you to synthesize that and make it applicable to your situation. So what do you do in that case? And some people say, yeah, you lawyers are too expensive. Here's my suggestion. They are free or low cost or even modified services that you can find. Most lawyers, like our law firm, would be more than happy to give you referrals to places that you can afford or places that have free services if your case qualifies. So you can talk to bar associations like Minnesota Bar Association. Our own Kenya USA Bar Association has resources. And there's no reason why any one of us, any one African person should be struggling with a legal issue without at least reaching out to someone. And most lawyers I know are very happy to work with you, whether you're a fee-paying client or no fee-paying client. And if they can't help you, they will try and send you where you can get help. So I think that for the sake of our own families and our own selves, we owe it that phone call or that email just to say, Attorney Nan-Google, can you help me with this? And then they will direct you appropriately.
You make good points, and we're running out of time. Professor Pierre Lois is standing by. You make a good point, and I think this is a conversation that can't end today. Probably is the beginning of many more conversations to come. I'm a professor, and I teach a class, emotional intelligence, how to be emotionally intelligent. You're a lawyer, and I'm glad that you're talking about cooling down. It's essentially being emotionally intelligent. Look, things do happen. If you're a human being, sometimes there's a conflict of interest. And I think what I've seen in the immigrant community, I've seen actually quite a number of people nowadays, they go through a very nasty divorce process, spend a lot of money with lawyers, and then 2-3 years later, you find the same people coming back together. But by the time they're coming back together, maybe more children have been brought to the world, maybe here in the US, or somebody has gone back to Africa and asked children in Africa. The moment these ones get back in the US, then there are children in Africa who are now left without a father. And that becomes very painful. So let me see if we can take a quick question from 2 viewers. Ben, if you don't mind, bring those to the screen so that Wakili can answer 1 or 2 questions, then we can conclude the session. Okay, I think there was a question there from Dr. Orina Machoka. Dr. Orina Machoka was essentially asking, how should a black man behave? Do we have that on the screen, Ben, if you could, please? Okay, so he's bringing the questions momentarily, and I think so that you can. And by the way, as he brings the questions back, I want to acknowledge your background. I love your background. I like that Kenyan flag, and I like that if you're watching us, please, and you're considering safari, go on safari. Kenya is a good destination for you. So there's a question from Dr. Orina Machoka, and a very brilliant young man. It was on the show last week talking about COVID-19. So the question for you is, how does it affect me in the criminal justice system, being a man and a black and a black descent. How should I behave if approached by a law enforcement officer? And that's a very, very common problem within the African immigrant community.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Machoko, for the question. The best way I advise my clients to do is follow the directions. We can see this at two different levels. The first is the level of apprehension or possible arrest, which is where, say it's on the road, say it's a traffic incident. I would say follow the guidance or the guidelines of the law enforcement officer. Then once we get into the court system, I find that the court system is fair and just, but you have to get in there. If you didn't obey the officer's commands and unfortunately you got shot, then obviously there's nothing we can do. So our advice is, if, for example, you are asked to stay where you are, do not put your hands in your pocket, do not do anything, just follow the guidance, because at the end of the day, here's what I tell my clients. At the end of the day, the policeman has a gun and you don't. So you're not going to win in this fight, especially if, as Machoka says, if you're black and a young man, because we have seen cases where policemen have said that they feel threatened by your presence. So the last thing you want to do is to give that cop an excuse to shoot you and claim that you threatened or you looked menacing or you. I mean, we have tall, big African men. The policeman would say, "Yeah, I felt threatened, and I shot in self-defense," and you probably lose that case. So our advice is don't try to outsmart the cops because they have more weapons than you do.
Okay, sounds good, Wakili. So for our viewers, thank you. I know there are so many questions that coming on our Facebook page. Please continue to have those questions there. We'll put them together, and Wakili will have him, and I think even Wakili Opand and the team will come on the show sometime later to talk about this. So that's first question there, you'll answer that, but there's a second part I want you to speak to, that one here. I agree many Africans don't have a written will. There is a belief among us that you will try to kill me. In fact, that's a major problem, and I've seen people in the community talking about life insurance, but the belief is if you have life insurance or you have a will, potentially your partner is going to kill you to make money. It sounds a joke, but quite frankly, people fear doing this. What is your advice on the same, and then how should people get in contact with you, Wakili?
I think the fear is genuine. We are, as African people, we tend to be very superstitious. We think that if we don't mention something, then it doesn't exist. The fact of the matter is, you are going to die. That is going to happen. The question is, when is it going to happen? As far as your partner thinking that now that you have insurance, they might kill you to benefit, this is where the idea of confidentiality comes in. You can obtain policies, if you are concerned about that, you can obtain policies without anybody really knowing. And I know very fine insurance agents that will not disclose if the instructions are, do not tell so and so that I have obtained this policy. So I still feel that you have nothing to lose, but everything to lose by not getting these things done. And I think it's just the courage of saying, okay, I may die one day, let me put as many tools in the toolkit as I can to protect both my family and my family in the event of my death. I think that is the bottom line, and I don't know that there is any way to make everyone feel confident or comfortable about death except telling them, yes, face it, it's happening.
Wakili, there are so many questions for you. There are so many questions for you. You're very eloquent. It's an honor to call you a dear friend of mine, but they're asking about the contract. If you don't mind, make a closing statement. At the same time, your former teacher, professor at the University of Nairobi, Professor Patrick Lumumba, is standing by. Make your contact information, closing statement, and what's your word to your professor? I think he did an excellent job teaching you in school. You must have been a good student.
Thank you, Daktari. And I feel so bad that I came before my honored professor of judicial review, as he would say, as he then was, Professor Lumumba is a wonderful, wonderful teacher, wonderful son of Africa, great patriot. I can't say enough good things about him. But as we close, I want to really thank you and your viewers and the KDRTV team for availing this opportunity to discuss these issues. And I know that we barely scratched the surface of the issues, but we at least have begun the conversation. Now, at least your viewers, those who would like to continue this conversation, either through social media or as COVID slows down, even in person, would at least have a place to begin the conversation. I encourage all of us to remain engaged. I think the worst thing that can happen is that we know things and they never happen to us. I mean, we write a will and there's no problem, or we are ready for police interaction and we are never stopped by the police. That's the worst thing that can happen. But I really thank you for the time, and I can share my contacts. I do not know how you'd like me to do that. I can read out my phone number and my email address. So my phone number is 612-558-9487. And our website is diasporalawyers.com. On Twitter, we are at Wakili Ongeri. And physical address, we are in the city of Brooklyn Center, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And once again, I thank you for that chance, and I'll stay on and listen to my favorite teacher, Professor Lumumba, and to be exciting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Ongeri, for such an insightful contribution. You've always been a personal friend, a friend to KDRTV. You are among the very first people who really advise them on how to move forward with this. Thank you, but more importantly to the immigrant community, thank you for the wonderful service you've done for us over the last 2 decades. I think you are really an inspirational figure. You're very influential. We appreciate you. Most people may not tell you this, but I'll tell you this for sure. We love you. We appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing. And again, many thanks again to you. And for our viewers, especially those ones watching from Kenya and elsewhere around the world, we are going to take a break, and we should be back within 7 minutes, and we'll bring on to you Professor Patrick Lumumba, who is standing by from Nairobi, Kenya.
We know how stressful it can get to take care of the healthcare needs of your loved ones, especially when they live far away from you. Money transfer services have expensive fees.
Yes.
They cannot ensure that your money is spent on the intended healthcare needs. And there are many questionable pharmacies that sell low quality, unsafe, and even counterfeit medications. That is why we created Diaspora Care, a secure, quick, and cost-effective way to pay for the medications of your loved ones through our network of accredited and registered pharmacies. So here's how it works. Meet David. He lives far away from home. Unfortunately, his mother was recently diagnosed with diabetes, but she can't afford her new medication. So after funding his Diaspora Care account, David enrolls his mother as a beneficiary, and a unique PIN code is issued. Think of this as a digital voucher that David paid for in advance. David's mother presents the PIN code at one of our accredited and registered in-network pharmacies. The cost of her medication is deducted from David's account, and his mother can walk in and out of the pharmacy with the medication she needs. It's as easy as that. David can also assign his uncle, who lives close to his mother, as a caretaker to help her follow the new diabetes treatments. For extra security, David can also create one-time PIN codes and manually confirm and approve medication purchases too. It's easy to send more money home and hope they got spent on buying safe medication. But what if you can have control over how your money is spent, gain access to safe and quality medication, and purchase multiple medications for multiple family members who are in need? Your money goes a lot farther, and healthcare becomes a lot more inclusive. Diaspora Care was created by Diaspora members for Diaspora members that help provide greater access to safe, quality, and affordable medications for your loved ones back home. It's time for your loved ones to get the quality medication they need, and for you to get the peace of mind you deserve. Sign up today and register your loved ones for free at diasporacare.com.